Hi, I'm Bob Herbert. Welcome to OpEd.tv. My guest is a great journalist and an old friend, Juan Gonzalez. We were colleagues together many years ago at the Daily News. Juan is a co-host with Amy Goodman on Democracy Now! And recently stepped away from the Daily News after writing an award-winning column for nearly 20 years. We've got a lot to talk about, so let's get started. Juan, thanks so much for coming in. I really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure.
So you left the Daily News. You wrote a column for all those years, almost 20 years.
Actually, closer to 30. It was I got there in '87. Yeah, so it's been about.
Oh my God! Why
yeah, closer to 30.
20, closer to 30.
Well, as we get older, the years old.
Exactly. So I left the Times. I've been writing a column at the Daily News, and then I left the Times after writing a column for 18 years. In my case, it was an odd but exhilarating feeling, not having to face that deadline 2 or 3 times a week. How's it been with you?
Well, it's still pretty early. I only left a couple of months ago, and I've been keeping busy with other projects I've been working on. But and I also did agree with the News. They asked me to write an occasional column, so I am going to be contributing probably about once a month a column for the paper. But definitely, when you've been constantly chained to news events,
Exactly, that's what it is.
It is chained week in and week out. It is kind of strange to be able not to have to jump on the news cycle,
right,
what you're hearing. But I think it was time. It was time. The newspaper business has changed dramatically. I wanted to be able to do other kinds of more long-form journalism, and this gives me the opportunity to do that. And I wanted to do some teaching. I'll be starting at Rutgers University as a professor of journalism in January. So I'll be able to sort of help mentor another generation of young journalists, hopefully, in the not too distant future.
That's really cool. So you had a really interesting pre-journalism life. You always seemed to be where the action was. So take us back to those days as a student activist. And tell us a little bit about that. You were up at Columbia University, right?
Right. Well, I was an undergraduate at Columbia during that, I guess, the convulsive years in American history. I was class of '68 at Columbia, and so I got it my senior year. Martin Luther King gets assassinated. Bobby Kennedy gets assassinated. There's riots in 100 cities in the United States in the week after King is assassinated. We're not talking about one Ferguson or one LA after Rodney King. It was 100 cities.
It seemed like it was something enormous was happening every day almost, right?
Right, and that was the year that Johnson resigned, and he said he wasn't going to run for president again. The McCarthy movement, the Vietnam War.
You had the Chicago Democratic Convention, the riots out there.
So I got involved at Columbia in the Students for Democratic Society. We had one of the largest student strikes in the history of the United States, where the two big issues were the Vietnam War and also the university's expansion into the Harlem community, stopping the constant encroachment of Columbia University and the eviction of thousands and thousands of African Americans and Latinos. So those were the issues of the strike. And although I had been on the Columbia Spectator, I'd wanted to be a journalist. And when I was in school, I sort of got deviated for about 10 years in social activism. First with SDS, and then subsequently with the Young Lords.
The Young Lords,
So I went back into East Harlem, my own community, with a bunch of other young Puerto Ricans. And we formed a radical Puerto Rican group attempting to get respect and equality for the Puerto Rican community, which at that time was a silent community here in New York City.
Right.
So I spent many years with first the Young Lords, and then with another organization that we developed, the National Congress for Puerto Rican Rights. So it wasn't until my 30s that I actually went back to the original thing that I had wanted to do, was become a journalist.
The demonstrations at Columbia in 1968, so it was SDS, you were a member of SDS, and there were also African-American student organizations who were part of that demonstration and seized some buildings at Columbia.
Right.
One of the biggest aspects of that story was the way the police went in there and actually broke it up. I mean, I guess
well, the Student Afro-American Society, they had been battling racism on campus for several years. There have been a number of incidents, and so we sort of basically united on, it was April 23rd when the whole occupations and the strike started of '68. And we worked in coordination, but the African American students wanted to have one building of their own, which was Hamilton Hall, the main undergraduate building. And the rest of the activists, which not only included SDS, but other groups on campus, then we occupied 4 other buildings. The Butler, the main administration building, the architecture school.
This was a huge national story.
Oh, yeah, it was for weeks. It was on front page on the Times. After, I guess about 1,000 of us occupied the buildings for a week before Mayor Lindsay called in the police.
Right.
In the process, though, of arresting all of the demonstrators, the police brutalized hundreds of people. I think something like 150 people were not even arrested, just went to the hospital with injuries. And so that provoked a complete shutdown of the university, a strike by all the other students who maybe didn't agree with us, but they were horrified by how the police had dealt with the situation. So for the entire rest of the semester, the university was shut down by a strike of about 10,000 students.
Were you in one of the buildings when the police came in?
No, because I was on the coordinating committee. And the coordinating committee, we had chosen a few people that would not get arrested. I had been arrested previously in a protest blocking the gym site in Morningside Park, because Columbia was trying to build a gym
in the park.
In the park, but
which is public property.
Right, but it would only be open to Columbia students with a back door for the community a few hours a week.
Some people objected to that.
So I had gotten arrested with a few other folks. Mark Nason, who was then with Columbia Cord, now runs the African American Studies program at Fordham, and a few others. We were arrested trying to block the bulldozers in January of '68. And subsequently, during the strike, there were many other protests. I was arrested once in an occupation of the School for International Affairs, which was then run by Brzezinski. And we had a protest there. But interestingly, one of the leaders of the African American students, Bill Sales, was a graduate student at the School for International Affairs under Brzezinski.
Is that right?
And he was one of the people who was instrumental, a key leader of the strike.
For those who are too young to remember, and there are many of them, tell us a little bit about the Young Lords. What were they about, and how did your association with them affect your subsequent life?
Well, the Lords, as I said, was a group of young Puerto Ricans. When I joined, I was 21, and I was probably the oldest person in the leadership of the organization. Everyone else was 18, 19. We even had one leader who was a 15-year-old high school dropout. And we were basically the children of that first generation of Puerto Rican migrants who had come here in the 40s and the 50s. And we'd seen our parents working hard in the garment industry and in the hotels and as doormen and maintenance men, and yet totally being mistreated and disrespected by the rest of the society. So we were sort of the first group to go to college, and we immediately began to demand better treatment for the community. So the Lords did stuff like protest the lack of sanitation pickup in East Harlem by the sanitation department. We did a big, one of our most influential activities was documenting an epidemic of lead poisoning in East Harlem and the South Bronx, where we would go along with one medical school student. There were a bunch of radical white medical students at the old Flower Fifth Avenue Medical Hospital. And so we began taking urine samples among kids in the tenements, and the students then documented this incredible level of lead poisoning. A young radical writer at the Village Voice in those days, they were all radical then, but Jack Newfield wrote a series of columns about the lead poison epidemic. And shortly after that, the city council and Mayor Lindsay approved the lead paint removal ordinance, which is still in effect. It's still landlords, when they find lead in their paint, in the paint in their buildings, must remove it. So we got involved in that. We did a big protest in July of 1970 again, taking over a hospital, the old Lincoln Hospital, which the city had been promising to tear down and rebuild for 25 years and had never done it. So we did a big sit-in at the hospital, raised a lot of public attention, and the Lindsay administration then agreed to build the new hospital, which it did. It built the new Lincoln Hospital eventually. So those were the kinds of things we did. Basically, we demanded equal treatment in city services for the Puerto Rican and Latino community in the city.
How did you eventually get into journalism? Because you really did take a detour.
Well, interestingly enough, as I said, I had been interested in journalism previously, and editor of my high school paper, on the Columbia Spectator. But the Lords produced a lot of journalists. In fact, Jimmy Breslin once joked that the Lords produced more great journalists than the Columbia Journalism School, because out of the Lords came Pablo Guzman, who was our Minister of Information, who was one of the 18-year-olds under the leadership of the organization. Out of the
It's hard
Lords,
for me to imagine Pablo Guzman as an 18-year-old.
we used to call him Yoruba. That was Pablo Yoruba Guzman. And then Felipe Luciano came out of the Young Lords, and he eventually became a WNBC and Fox News reporter. And of course, Geraldo Rivera, who was not in the Lords, but he was one of our first lawyers. And it was as a result of him constantly being at press conferences and standing up to the police that eventually Fred Friendly, who was then running the minority journalism program at Columbia, Columbia got Geraldo to go to the J School, and then that's how he became a young ABC reporter. So you had quite a few of the folks in the Lords, because we had our own newspaper. We had our own weekly newspaper that we produced in the organization. We had our own radio show, which we did on WBAI for a while. So we began to understand the power that the mass media has in shaping what the American people believe to be the pressing issues of the time. So I think when the Lords broke up, a lot of us realized that there was an opportunity to continue the same kind of ideals that we had, but transfer them into journalism. And I think that's what propelled so many of the folks, the former leaders, to go into journalism.
Did you get into it in Philadelphia?
Yes, yeah. Well, I continued as an activist for several more years after the Lords, and then eventually in '78 was taking because I was kicked out of Columbia during the strike, so I hadn't immediately got my
Why did
degree.
that happen?
For violating university rules of some sort or other. So then I was taking a course at Temple University, a night course while I was working, and one of the teachers there was an editor at the Philadelphia Daily News, and he saw some of my work and he says, "Yeah, you're a pretty good writer. Why don't you? We've got some openings. Why don't you apply for them?" And so I then did apply, and eventually, not eventually, but pretty soon thereafter, landed a job '79 at the Philadelphia Daily News, and then eventually became a police reporter, a labor reporter, schools reporter, and a city hall reporter at the Philadelphia Daily News.
So Gil Spencer, an old editor at the Daily News who had come up from Philadelphia, brought you to the Daily News in New York, which is where I met you back in '87.
In '87, right?
Yeah,
that's when Spencer had moved to New York in '85, and he started calling me up saying, "Listen, because he'd always liked me and he'd always been impressed with my work." So as he was trying to put his stamp on the paper, he then asked me if I'd be interested in coming back to New York.
Spencer loved columnists.
Yes, he did.
Which was great for us.
So, and I remember he always said, when he first hired me, he said, "Look, I just want you to hit hard and hit often."
There you go. Bringing it up to the present day, we've got two enormous stories going on simultaneously. Actually, there's more than two, but two really big ones. One is the presidential election, of course. The other is what's going on with the cops. We had the terrible tragedy in Dallas where 5 police officers were killed, but we've also had a series of cases where the police have killed unarmed African-American civilians. Let's talk about the police stuff first. I mean, people act like this sort of happens in a vacuum, that if you just take care of the police problems, if you do better training or whatever, we can solve this. But that hasn't worked. For decades, we continue to see these problems. So can you talk about a little bit about sort of the context of the racial and ethnic problems that we have in this society in which these police problems occur?
Well, I think if anybody who really bothered to pay attention in American history or did their own independent study of American history realizes that this is not a new problem.
Right.
And in fact, if you go back throughout the entire 20th century, most of the urban insurrections that occurred, from the Chicago race riot of 1919, the East St. Louis riot of 1917,
Detroit and Newark in
Detroit-
1967,
and in
both
the,
of them.
And in the 1940s, they are almost always touched off by a police murder of an African American.
Right.
And so this is a historic pattern throughout American history, that the unresolved racial problems periodically, and I have a theory, this is my theory. Your average police department, most cops are in 20 and out or 25 and out. So every 25 years, the police departments of America change personnel on the street.
Interesting,
And
right.
therefore, there's a new generation of police that are now in the streets in Baltimore, Chicago, New York, that weren't there in the 60s
No
and the
historic
70s.
memory.
No historic memory. The institution didn't bother to retain some lessons for them. So every generation of cops has to go through the same situation of increasingly getting into conflict with their community, facing resistance, and then trying to reform. At the same time, the media is constantly turning over. So now the young reporters that are now so shocked about what happened in Dallas
Right.
and what happened in Louisiana
Right.
and what happened in Minnesota weren't there 20, 30 years ago. So
How
for
many
them,
times
it's
have you and
news.
I covered this story?
Right. Eleanor Bumpers. Anyone
Yep.
forgotten Eleanor Bumpers?
Exactly right.
Has anybody forgotten all the other things that happened in the 60s and then again in the 80s? And so now we are here again. So what happens is it's almost like you keep having to learn the same lesson all over again instead of studying your history,
Yep.
instead of making institutional and cultural changes in the way these departments operate and function that last. So I think that's what the problem is. So now there's all this shock. Oh, is the nation falling apart? The nation has turmoil, and certainly, if anything, that the last year or two has proven is that all that nonsense we heard when Obama was elected, that we were living in a post-racial
Post-racial.
America, was just nonsense. But then again, that was a young generation of journalists who believed that just because you elect an African-American president, that all the other problems of race, the institutional, the endemic, and the problems disappear. They don't. You still have to deal with transforming the institutions of the society.
And those issues are front and center in the presidential election, actually writ even larger with the Trump candidacy and, of course, everything we've seen with the Republican Party over the past several years. But were you as surprised as everyone else by how well Trump did, that he actually secured the Republican nomination?
Yes, I was, because I did not believe that, I really thought that the society had progressed, at least to the point of wanting someone with basic a modicum of intelligence in the way they presented the issues of the day. So I've been really surprised that there are that many Americans who have rallied to Trump's call. At the same time, we shouldn't be surprised, because there is such enormous disconnect now between the elites of both parties, Democratic and Republican Party, and the mass of Americans who feel left out by the continued wealth inequality and the growing wealth inequality in the country, that it should not be that surprising that you would have the rise of populism from both the left and the right among the American population at a time of such anger and resentment over the failure of the political classes to resolve the problems of the people.
So you and I are both at pretty much at the far left side of the political spectrum. The Democrats are on the verge of nominating Hillary Clinton as their candidate this year. If Trump weren't in the picture, it's almost like an emergency. You have all these Democrats saying, well, you have to vote for Hillary because otherwise you have Donald Trump president. But if Trump weren't in the president, what would you be saying about Hillary Clinton as a presidential candidate at this point?
Well, I would be saying the same thing either way. If she was the nominee of the Democratic Party, whether it was Trump or not, is that on the one hand, as Obama has said, and I said in a column way back in January as this whole thing was developing, that there's no doubt that Hillary Clinton, on paper, has the best resume to be president of the United States, probably of anybody who's ever run for the office, in terms of the responsibility she's held, the knowledge she has.
Yeah, she's certainly qualified
She's certainly
to hold the
qualified.
office.
Yes, absolutely. Whereas you would certainly question that about somebody like Donald Trump, whether he even has the qualifications.
Right.
And at the same time, that she has been for decades now a representative of this centrist right wing of the Democratic Party that sees its politics wrapped up with the wealthy sectors of American society while they appeal to working people and African Americans and Latinos. So she is certainly more conservative than Bernie Sanders. I thought that Bernie Sanders would have made a great president, but he didn't win the nomination. So now the issue is, and I've told this to a lot of Bernie supporters, for the Latino community, which obviously is a huge and growing population, especially Latino millennials, there's no doubt in my mind that this election is going to be a cause for survival.
Right.
Because we're talking about survival here. You're talking about one candidate has vowed to get rid of Obama's temporary reprieve for the Dreamers as well as for their parents.
Yep.
So they're facing the potential of mass deportation, and their relatives who are American citizens are going to turn out, I believe, in unprecedented numbers just because it's a matter of survival for them. I think that that the Muslim American community, of which there are a lot more than Muslim Americans and people realize, is also going to see this as a cause that they've got to fight for. African Americans have never been close to Donald Trump, no matter what Trump claims to say, how many friends he counts in the African American community.
Good buddy, I guess.
So I think that the reality is that the future majority of the country will see its future tied to Hillary Clinton winning the election rather than Donald Trump. To what degree the Republican Party can muster this unwieldy and unholy alliance that they have to back Trump it remains to be seen. I actually think that we're on the cusp of a potential Lyndon Johnson-Barry Goldwater election.
That 1964 election was truly a watershed.
Yes, because President Johnson, even though he was a centrist Democrat, had control of both the House and the Senate in those few short years, all this amazing social legislation.
Veto-proof majorities.
Yes, he had a veto-proof majority in the Senate, and it became this incredible period of the Fair Housing Act, the Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting was established then, the Elementary and Secondary Schools Act. All of that happened. The Immigration Reform Act of 1965. The last time immigration was reformed was in that period.
I mean, it was incredible. Much of what we see today, the United States that we're living in today, was a result of that period.
Of that period, right.
Yeah.
And that's why I believe there's the possibility for that if the various populist and progressive groups can unite with a flawed candidate. Lyndon Johnson was a flawed candidate, and Hillary Clinton is a flawed candidate, but the potential is much greater than one individual or what one person can do.
Well, much to my chagrin, we've run out of time. Juan Gonzalez, it's been a pleasure talking to you, and I hope we can get you back again.
Absolutely. It's been my pleasure, Bob.
We'll be back in a moment with a final word. Some years have a particular historical resonance. 1964, as we've just mentioned, when Barry Goldwater was trounced in a presidential election that ushered in the most liberal period in American history. The year 2000, when the Supreme Court handed the presidency to George W. Bush, who led us into the catastrophic war in Iraq and the worst economic calamity since the Great Depression. We are now in one of those years, 2016. The depraved attack on police officers in Dallas that left 5 officers dead And the horrific killings of black men and boys by police officers, killings captured on video, have left no doubt about the enormity of the racial problems facing this society. At the same time, we are in the midst of a presidential election in which one candidate is not just unqualified to hold the office, he is also espousing policies that are authoritarian and potentially fascist. In other words, un-American. As citizens, we have choices to make in this seminal year. Instead of talking endlessly about the racism and outlandish violence that have plagued us for so long, we have an opportunity, now that everyone is paying attention, to stop blathering and actually do something real about these twin plagues. And we have a chance to say, no, Mr. Trump, you've got it wrong. America is better than the backward, bigoted society that you imagine us to be. It's our call. In a democracy, the citizens shape the society they want to live in. We need to make clear the kind of America that we want. That's all for now. See you next time.